According to the three sources cited by Politico, the FTC chair Lena Khan is looking to rein in the power of the world's largest technology companies. With that being said, it is looking like that the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, for the U.S., is likely to file an antitrust lawsuit to block Microsoft's takeover of Activision Blizzard, according to a new report by Politico. This has been pretty much hinted at for the past few months that this was a possibility of happening. This wasn't from the beginning something that was obvious, but as time went on, it started looking like this was a possibility. And now that more politics-focused and more government-focused websites are reporting on this, it's looking likely that this will happen. Zero, what are your thoughts of the news that the FTC are likely to bring up an antitrust lawsuit over the Activision Blizzard acquisition?
It's a bit interesting, mostly because I know I was being a bit cynical several weeks ago just about the whole Activision Blizzard deal with Microsoft. I was just like, well, Microsoft is one of the biggest software companies in the world. Microsoft products are pretty much proliferated throughout the US government. So, just Microsoft was just likely going to steamroll through the deal without any opposition was going to be the likely result. But yeah, just to see that the FTC might have to step in and intervene and say, hey, either you've got to change some details of the deal or do something, it's going to get interesting and potentially thorny, especially with the fact that I imagine there's likely some sort of clause in this acquisition contract that if a third party not related to either Activision Blizzard or Microsoft ends up breaking the deal, that Microsoft ends up getting a bunch of money for it. And again, just one of the potential scenarios I could see is the deal falls through, Microsoft gets a fat wad of cash, and they end up kind of laughing it to the bank and go, well, just Sony, we gave you a chance to, just try to play nice and try to, not piss off any regulators, but you all had to make a stink about it to catch the FTC's eye. So yeah, we're going to buy up From Software and a couple of other companies that make some uniquely Japanese games. And yeah, you can just chew on that for a bit.
Yeah. And that won't bring the ire of the FTC. They won't even look at that. They'll just be like, okay, whatever, and move on from there. Which is why I'm finding the potential of the lawsuit puzzling in this. Because, and we are dealing with people here who are not in the know of the video games industry. They are basically relying on what's been given to them, which is basically what Sony has been saying, and Jim Ryan. That basically saying that if they were to get this, the whole games industry would collapse in on itself and would not be able to survive. It would just be Microsoft, which is not the case. Period. It's not the case. But
yeah, because I think even Microsoft ended up in a statement basically when basically asked just if this acquisition would be a detriment to Sony or not, because of the potential exclusive titles that Activision Blizzard's branding would provide them. I think one of Microsoft's comments was, actually, no, Sony's got the better exclusives.
Yeah, but that's legal posturing. That
it certainly is.
that is just posturing to a certain extent, because Sony has been doing it too. Microsoft's going to do it back. The funny thing that I thought was funny this week was that Microsoft is trying to make Sony into Nintendo and make Microsoft the only place for quote-unquote mature games and shooters. And which I looked at that and went, wouldn't you want to be Nintendo? Like, I guess maybe not the Sony company in itself, maybe like the tech company may not want that. But if I were like a game development house or a house that made game systems, like, I'd want to be Nintendo. Like, what's wrong with that? With that, it's just like, it's so stupid because Nintendo, in an honest opinion, I think Nintendo wouldn't mind having Call of Duty. but they purposely do low tech stuff. That's why Nintendo is not getting all the mature rated or the bombastic high tech games. It's because they do low tech consoles. That's the reason. It's not a competitive reason. It's they thought, oh, if we go low tech but do in a different way, we can gain a more sizable footprint of the industry. And that's what they did. It will just mean that Sony is going to have to come up with something different. And even then, they don't have to do anything different. They really don't. All they have to do is compete. And that's what this is. It is basically, they want the FTC to compete for them. And so far, it's going pretty well for them. For at least the US, UK, and the EU, they're all pretty much eating out of Sony's hands. Now, here, and we've discussed this before too, it'll just take some of these regulators to finally dig into the numbers and look at the industry and go, wait a minute. First off, COD is not the biggest, because they're making out COD to being the most popular brand in gaming, which is not true. Technically, it's Pokemon. Like, Pokemon is probably the most popular brand in gaming, followed by Fortnite, and then Mario, Zelda, Halo. Like, those are more popular in that case. I don't know if they're trying to delay it or try to get some concessions. Maybe that is what they're trying to do here, to get some concessions out of this so they can gain enough of a foothold to not get hurt that badly. Maybe that's what they're doing in this case. I'm not too surprised that these regulators are eating this up and not looking further into it. I'm kind of not surprised, because if there's anything that doesn't know anything, really, it's the government, unfortunately. I'm surprised that it's going so well. I'm just curious, like you said, I'm curious to what happens when this is over. Whether the deal goes through or not. If the deal goes through, I'm really interested to see what Microsoft does in retaliation. But if it doesn't go through, I think you're right. What they'll do basically is says, okay, fine, we'll buy From Software and Square Enix, have a nice day, goodbye. And then what will Sony do? Because Sony can't go to the FTC for that. Because they're going to say, wait a minute, you said the $67 billion thing was the one that was going to cause the whole industry to come down. How is this $800 million purchase going to do that? How is this $1 billion purchase going to do that? What are you talking about, Sony? Like, I'm curious, really, to where they're going to go from there. So,
Yeah, because if this deal goes bust and Microsoft ends up getting a bunch of money that they give to the Xbox division due to the contract falling through, Sony's going to look like they're crying wolf if Microsoft turns around and uses this brand new war chest of money to say, all right, well, Square Enix looks very attractive now, so yeah, sure, we'll throw a bunch of money and buy them out and everything. Or another good one being FromSoft, like we've said before, or who knows what other studios could be considered as beloved to the public and not potentially under the houses of either Sony or Nintendo. Just Microsoft could end up throwing money at something, and it's just not going to look good to regulators if Microsoft does that, and then Sony turns around, cries wolf, and goes, "Oh my God, their purchase of From Software is disrupting the video gaming industry." Because I can see just regulators just looking back, going, "Wait, didn't you say that this Activision deal was going to be the end of gaming because it was going to provide unfair competition? How is this much smaller company going to be doing the same thing? They're smaller. This is not really an issue." And then just we get into a potential timeline where maybe the next Elden Ring game is just an Xbox and PC only thing. I don't like that future either, as much as anyone else. So yeah, just it's not something that has a black or white solution, as many people would like to think it does. This is going to be one for the ages, and I think I can speak for the both of us. We're probably going to be watching this with very bated breath.
Yep. Serbia just unconditionally approved the acquisition, and it looks as if reports are saying that the EU will accept concessions in order to actually let the deal go through. So there's that. If the EU, I think it's the EU. Is it EU or UK?
Yeah, I think it's the EU will allow concessions. The UK had one of their commissions express concerns over everything, but
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately, just even with the concerns being had, things were the organization that had expressed concerns really wasn't very powerful overall. If anything, I think some people had commented that the organization in the UK was a bit toothless of all things.
Yeah,
So
it's the EU. Yeah, the EU will be Microsoft is likely to offer concessions to help gain EU approval for Activision deal. So, which we also talked about. We also said that there is a possibility that Microsoft might pay a fine, or they might make something available to everyone for a period of time. We've talked about that before. My question really is, because Activision Blizzard is also spending money to defend this. What exactly does PlayStation really think they're going to get out of this? Do they really think if this goes bust, everyone's going to be like, oh well, I guess we're going to have to make everything exclusive. They're going to have to do more stuff with PlayStation again. I don't see that. I see this as basically, if this doesn't go through, Activision Blizzard turns around and goes, fine, fuck you then. We're going to make this exclusive stuff to Microsoft. You can go piss off and go from there. They'll still put the game out on PlayStation, sure, but I could foresee that if this doesn't go through, that the one company that would be most pissed off about this is Activision Blizzard. And from what I've heard of Bobby Kotick, he's not somebody who will be like, it's business. No, he will not hesitate to screw somebody over. And he's not going to lose his job if Activision Blizzard is not bought out. He'll still remain a CEO. He will be Activision CEO in perpetuity if this doesn't go through, to be absolutely honest. I don't see what Sony gains from doing this at all, to be absolutely honest. And here's the other thing. I don't think the lawsuit is going to be that fruitful in the end. I think they will threaten the lawsuit. They'll file it. Microsoft will go to the negotiating table, say, okay, what would you guys like for us to let this go through? And even though their boss said, I want to crack down on these I want to crack down on these companies, we all know if you grease a few palms and you do certain things, you'll get it to go through anyway. So, what do you think the concessions will be for the US or the EU that will allow this to go through?
ooh, that's gonna be a hard one.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
I think probably the first one that's going to be on the table is likely going to be some sort of like concession or promise that Call of Duty will always be available for PlayStation. There won't be any sort of sweetheart deal like, there will be a concession in the contract that says that PlayStation will be the official tournament platform for Call of Duty. That ship has since passed, but yeah, just at minimum, it'll be some sort of promise or commitment that, future Call of Duty games will be available on PlayStation. And there will no longer be stuff like, PlayStation gets beta access 1 month early than any other platform. If anything, I could see Activision Blizzard just going, oh, well, since Sony screwed the deal where, we could have had a huge payday, fuck those guys. We'll do some exclusivity deals with Microsoft instead.
Yeah.
We'll say, premium camo pack for Xbox and PC. or just free season pass for Xbox players who are on Game Pass. Just there'll be some sort of like sneaky jabs at Sony for basically completely screwing the deal over.
Yeah. I think the concession of having Call of Duty in perpetuity, I think, will be excessive. I think it will be for 5 years, starting in 2023. I think what will end up happening is that they'll have to give Sony essentially, quote unquote, enough time for them to develop their own Call of Duty-esque game. And then that will allow them to basically, go on, and then they'll allow them to keep it from whatever that time may be, which might be what Microsoft was going to do in the first place, is to not essentially keep it under lock and key for a period of time. I can also see fines. I can also see him say, okay, you have to pay X amount of fines, which are probably in the billions at that point. Other than that, here's the thing that I find crazy about this, and it's basically that I don't think Call of Duty is the big thing here. I think it's King. I think King is the thing that Microsoft wants, because they want to have some kind of foothold in the mobile market. And with King, they're going to have one of the biggest games out there in mobile at that point. And with that, and you have Candy Crush, and you have all the games that King has. I mean, you have a money printing machine that doesn't take as much assets and much money to create, but is almost an infinite amount of money you can make. So I think King is the thing that they are really interested in. Not really. They're interested in Call of Duty to a good extent, but I really think it's King is the thing that they really want. But anyway, yeah, concessions I think is COD for a period of time on PlayStation and a fine. I think that's essentially what it's going to be. Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.